Today in our 2015 F-450, we're going to be installing Firestone's heavy-duty air compressor. This heavy-duty compressor from Firestone is going to offer a much higher pressure than most of the competitors out there on the market, up to 150 psi. So for your larger vehicles like our F-450 here, it's going to be a perfect match. So you're going to want a compressor that has the capability of supporting the loads that you're going to be putting on the airbags in the back. And this one's going to be able to get you to those higher pressures, supporting the biggest and heaviest loads. To get the most out of your compressor, we recommend that you use Firestone's air springs. You do want to make sure you don't over-pressurize your airbags. Another feature that I really like about this air compressor is the control unit that you mount inside. It has an air gauge on it, so you can constantly monitor your air pressure and ensure that it's at the right amount. And this can be really nice on those spring and fall months of the year when the weather fluctuates up and down, temperatures rising and lowering, which can drastically change pressures. There's a button right next to it that allows you to increase pressure by turning on the compressor or decrease pressure by relieving some of it. The gauge itself has a bulb located in the back that will illuminate it when you turn your lights on, so that way you can see it at night as well. Compared to the manual inflation valves that come with your airbags, the compressor system is going to save you a lot of time because you're not going to need to hunt down an air compressor, whether that be at a gas station. And this can vary every time you load and unload your vehicle. If you're constantly hauling it up, you may need to increase the pressure in the bags for your load. You unload your vehicle and then you need to decrease it. But if you're going to pick up another load, you're going to have to do that again and again. Well, with this on board, you can do it right from the comfort and seat of your vehicle. Now this doesn't mean you can't use your manual inflation valves. One of them can still be utilized in the event of emergency to inflate the airbags on your vehicle. You are going to lose the ability to inflate them from side to side to offset any uneven loads, but having that comfort of knowing that in the event of an emergency, you still have that option is a great feature. We'll begin our installation on the driver's side just behind the cab. We're going to be mounting it onto the frame located here. And we're going to be using some self-tapping screws. Now the screws that come provided in your kit are going to be short machine screws with nuts where you can drill holes and put them in, but due to the style of frame we have, it's going to be really complicated and very difficult to get those installed, if it is even possible depending on what we have back there. So to avoid all those complications, we'll just use these. We're now going to set our compressor up. We're going to put it in this orientation here. I want to make sure that the holes line up with the spot that is going to be solid, so that way the screw will tap into. So we're going to put it about there. And actually, we're going to put it about here. This way we know that we're not going to hit anything. And now we'll use the self-tapping screws to run it in. Now with our compressor securely mounted with the fasteners, we'll move on to connecting some of our wiring back here. The spade terminal coming off of your compressor is going to hook to the orange wire coming off of your harness. So we're just going to take those two, we're going to connect them together. Now we can mount our relay anywhere we'd like. We're just going to use a self-tapper to mount it to the frame, just like we did with the compressor here. But we want to make sure we got enough wiring to get up to our battery, so we're going to put this a little bit further up along the frame. We're now on the frame just between the front and rear door on the driver's side, and we're going to mount our relay behind the body mount here. And back on our compressor, we'll take the black wire coming off of it with the ring terminal and use a self-tapping screw to ground it. We'll now take the quick connect fitting that comes in our kit and we're going to thread it into the air compressor. You want to make sure you got a couple of threads with the sealant on it threaded down inside of the fitting. We'll tighten it down using a 9/16 wrench and a 1/2 inch wrench. We'll now take the air line that comes in the kit, we're going to plug it into our quick connect fitting. And now we're going to route our air line and wiring up into our engine compartment. We took our hose and our wiring, we routed it down our frame rail Now we do still got some looseness here. We'll clean that up at the end with some zip ties, but we're going to wait on that until we've got everything completed. We kept going down the frame rail, staying behind the body mounts until we get all the way to the front of the frame behind our wheel well here. And once we reach the fender liner, we curve up above the liner into our engine compartment. We then pulled our wiring up past our fender liner until we've got it draping off the driver's side here. Our power wire is going to hook to our battery positive, but we're going to do that last because we don't want it to power up until we're all done. The rest of our wiring that we routed up here needs to go inside. We'll route it inside through the grommet located in the firewall. We're going to be using an additional piece of airline tube to help us pull this through. So I've gone ahead and poked it through our grommet to where it comes out the other side. Now that we've got those pulled through, we'll need to figure out where we want to mount our gauge and switch assembly. We're going to be mounting ours right here underneath the dash. There's a metal support beam that goes across, and we'll be using a couple of self-tapping screws to get that mounted. Here's the beam we're going to mount it to. There's a small push pin that goes through it holding some wiring. I recommend that you just take some snips and just cut that off flush so that way our gauge will mount properly. Now remember that no self-tappers do come included with your kit. If you've been keeping track, we've had 8 self-tappers that we've used so far, and that'll be all that we're going to need for this installation. We then made all the necessary connections on the back side of our gauge and switch assembly. I did take the one screw out so I could slide it over to make it easier for you to see. Now you'll see 2 airline hoses here. So what we did first is the airline hose that we had run in, we cut it to length and then plugged it into our switch. This is going to be on this side over here, this bottom hose. When you cut your hose, you want to make sure that you cut it square, and I highly recommend using a pair of hose cutters, as this will cut it clean, square, and ensure that you have a leak-free fit. To help you get the hose onto your fitting, I do recommend putting some silicone lubricant on it or some soapy water, and that'll help slide it on easier. You could also take the end of your hose and put it in some hot water, and that will help the hose expand, making it easier as well. The rest of our hose that we cut off, we want to plug in over here to our gauge assembly. That's going to be this little T-fitting here. The rest of that hose is then going to go back out the grommet that we came in, as we're going to have to route that back to our airbags. The 2 wires coming off of our switch that are white here, one of them is going to plug in to the wire that we routed inside. The other white wire has a terminal on it, just like this one. You're going to need to cut that off and splice on a ring terminal. Attach it to one of the bolts that's already here, back behind our gauge on the center console area. Additionally, one of the black wires that comes off of the light for your gauge is going to need to be grounded as well. And it's the same thing. You can use a self-tapping screw with the ring terminal that comes in the kit, or you could get a larger ring terminal and put it to the same stud to ground it. The other black wire you're going to need to extend. You'll see wiring and hoses that run underneath your dash, so I'm just going to zip tie it along those factory hoses when I go to clean everything up as I go across. The connection we're going to make over here at our fuse box, we're not going to make now because we don't want to have any live wires or anything while we're finishing our installation. So we'll come back to our wiring over here later. So with that airline tube that we came out of the firewall with, we're routing it right back basically where it came from. We're going to follow our airline that we routed earlier all the way back past our compressor. When we went over the frame, that also goes over your fuel tank here, and we zip tied it to the wiring for our fuel tank. From there, our airline ends, and we go into the T-fitting that comes in the kit. This just presses in like we did into our air compressor's fitting. And from there, the 2 T's that come out of each side are going to go to your airbags. You'll have one for your left and one for your right. On our left airbag, before we put it into the airbag, we plugged it into another T-fitting. One is going to go to the airbag, and the other one is going to go back to the back of the vehicle where your manual inflation valve is that pre-existed from your airbag installation. This will give you the option to manually inflate if you so desire. This can be useful in case of a catastrophic failure of the compressor, so you can still utilize your airbags even though the compressor may not function any longer. The other fitting will not function anymore. You will no longer be able to change the load side to side. They're going to have to be inflated equally into both airbags. We're now back at our air compressor. We need to install the air filter. There's a small fitting that comes in your kit that has a nipple on one end and threads on the other. We're going to thread that into our compressor in the location here where the mounting bracket is. And you'll tighten that down with a 9/16 wrench. We'll then use the black tubing that comes in the kit to extend our air filter to a location where it's going to be nice and safe. So just like we did with our air line, we're going to put a little bit of spray lube on the hose. That'll make it easier to slide it onto the nippled end. Now that we've got it on there, we're going to need to determine where we want our air filter to be. Now we're routing ours up here. Now on yours, it may be a little bit different depending on the configuration your bed has. The main thing is you keep it up as high as possible so that way it's not sucking in any moisture and debris. And if you can find a place that you can poke it into that's going to hide it, that's going to be even better. So once you get your hose routed to that point, we're going to go ahead and cut this to length. We're going to put a little bit of spray lube on the filter. And then we'll insert that into our hose. And then we can just use our zip ties to keep it secure. We're going to strip off some of the wire casing here on our short end. We're then going to crimp a ring terminal on it. Now, the ring terminals that come in the kit are not going to fit on this wire. You are going to have to provide your own ring terminal. Those other ring terminals are mainly designed for the grounds that we were connecting earlier. And then we'll take our ring terminal here and we're going to connect it to our battery positive post. We'll use an 8mm socket to remove the nut. We'll slide our ring terminal onto the post and then reinstall the nut. Now the last thing we need to hook up is our black wire that we ran over to the fuse panel located here on our passenger side. This is going to allow the light behind the pressure gauge to illuminate so we can see it at night. The fuse that we're going to be tapping into here is only energized when we have our running lights on or our headlights. So if you've got your marker lights or headlights on, just like you would at night, this will illuminate so you can see it as well. We're going to be using fuse 40 in our body control module fuse box here, as that fuse is only energized when we have our headlights on. So we're going to take that out using the fuse puller that comes with your vehicle. The cover that you removed for your fuses here on the body control module, if you flip it over on the inside, you'll find the fuse puller there. Fuse 40 is located here next to this relay. We're going to use the puller here. You simply slide it over the fuse, and then when you pull it out, it takes the fuse with it. Now this is a low profile mini fuse, which will not work with the fuse taps. Now in order to make our connection here to our fuse box, we're going to be using a fuse tap from Firestone. These fuse taps do come with fuses, as you are going to need some additional fuses. However, you're going to need a total of 2 10-amp fuses, and the kit only comes with one, so you will have to provide an additional 10-amp fuse. Now you might be asking yourself, why can't I just use the one I pulled? Well, this is a low profile fuse, which will not work with our fuse tap. You're going to have to use the mini style fuses. So we're going to insert 2 10-amp fuses into our tap here. And you can purchase this tap from Firestone here at etrailer.com. And now we'll just reinsert our fuse back into our fuse box. Now once we do insert this, the cover that we removed here will not be able to reinstall. It's just not going to work. You would have to trim it in locations where the clips are that hold it on. But that's okay, because there is a second cover that goes over here, so you won't even really notice that that cover is missing. We'll now trim that black wire to length that we ran over. We're going to strip it back and then crimp it onto our fuse tap using the pre-installed butt connector. Wiring can then just be tucked up and we can reinstall our panel. So now when we turn on our headlights, you see that the light illuminates behind our gauges. And the button next to it, when depressed upwards, we should hear the compressor run. And we should also see the pressure begin to rise on our gauge. We're going to go ahead and air it up and then check for leaks at the back of our system. You'll want to spray all of your quick connect fittings and ensure that there's no presence of bubbles. If you see bubbles continually pouring out of your fitting, unlike what we have here, then you may have a leak and you may need to cut your hose, square again, and then reinsert it. And if there's no leaks like what we have here, then you can move on and check the rest of your fittings. And that completes our installation of Firestone's heavy-duty air compressor on our 2015 F-450.